After a long time in therapy with a self-psychologist, this one woman who was 52 finally felt accepted enough and mirrored enough to bring out her fantasy. Her fantasy was that she wanted to be a rock star. She's 52, she wants to be a Janis Joplin. Now, it took her a long time to get to where she could admit this to the therapist. And so, what their therapy attempted to do was to have her stop feeling so much shame about that fantasy. Now think about the Batman movie and all that stuff in this light. All these hidden away superheroes, Batman, Superman, all that stuff. But to help her feel good about her fantasy about wanting to be a rock star, and what she started to do is figure out ways that she can bring some of the energies off of that Janis Joplin into the workplace. So she went to work, and gradually she announced to her co-workers, look out now. I'm coming down here in a new way. In other words, she began to bring in a lot more of her grandiose exhibitionistic energy into her personality and expressing it at work. And the interesting thing is people usually enjoy you a lot more if you're a little bit in touch with your grandiosity. If you're not in touch with it, you're kind of boring. See? So the idea is to help individuals plug into that, not feel shame about it, but to plug into that and to learn to do now what they didn't learn to do as a child, learn to feel okay about this grandiose fantasy and to gradually try to find ways to embody this. Now let's turn to look at a Jungian way of thinking about this very same business. Now again, we talked a little bit about the importance of the relationship between the ego and the archetypal self. And we talk about how Jungians, Edinger in particular, has helped us talk about the need for the formation of the ego-self axis. Now, you should be able to think about what a Jungian would say about some of the things we've been talking about. That is to say, the archetypal self carries that grandiose energy that we've been talking about. You see, the archetypal self, like the grandiose self-organization, according to the self-psychologist, is full of fuel. But you can get in trouble with the archetypal self just as you can get in trouble with the grandiose self-organization. See? You can either be too close to it in the sense of you can become identified with it, like the narcissistic personality disorder. You could say that the narcissistic personality disorder is identified with it. Or you can be, in terms of your ego, out of touch with it consciously. Now, what we ought to be able to see, however, is just because the ego does not know itself to be in touch with the archetypal self, it doesn't mean it isn't. In other words, when you're not plugged in adequately to your archetypal self, it doesn't mean that your archetypal self is not in there. What is going on? Usually, the archetypal self is in your shadow much more. The archetypal energies are in your shadow, and you will normally project those things. You will either project them onto someone else or you will act them out in some way unconsciously. We can talk about manic depression as an individual who sometimes will get too much of a dose of archetypal energy and then oscillate away and get too little of it accessible to the ego. Very similar to the way the psychoanalytic self-psychologists talk about the energies of the grandiosity. But one of the things that I think is important for us to see about the contribution of Jungian thought is that from the Jungian point of view, you can see that the human personality is very, very creative about ways of being grandiose. You can be grandiose in a lot of different ways, not just one. You don't just have the narcissistic personality disorder if you think about this from a Jungian point of view. You can be grandiose and be acting out in any one of a number of configurations. And what I want to do with you before we stop and discuss, I want us to go through some of the different configurations in which the infantile grandiosity, you might say, can be expressed in different archetypal configurations in different psyches. And let's go through them now, and then we will discuss all this stuff. What they talk about is the narcissistic personality disorder, the one we talked about the person that thinks they're God's gift to the world, is, in my view, an example of an individual who is experiencing an archetypal inflation in the mode of the king or the queen. It's very interesting to think about the narcissistic personality disorder as sort of a boy king sitting on his high chair, expecting everybody to adore him, expecting everybody to mirror him, expecting everybody to bless him, for himself to become the center of the world. The narcissistic personality disorder is said to be incapable of love. And in this case, you would say that the individual expects the energies to come toward him, not to go out. He's not to be giving out. Yes?
I think I've observed this when a father had a son or had children and he could no longer get all the attention, and then these symptoms showed up at that stage of his life.
Yeah. Normally, he's saying that he's observed this in a case that he's worked with. If the individual has been pampered, you can get to be a narcissistic personality disorder and kind of think you're the boy king or the girl queen in a lot of ways. You can be pampered. See, pampering will do it. Because one of the important things that these people that work with this talk about is that you have to be let down from your little high chair throne gradually. If they knock you off your high chair throne by hitting you and beating you up as a child, it doesn't transform this stuff. It doesn't integrate his self-esteem. You have to be let down gradually, see. And when they don't let you down gradually, and they knock you down, you can continue to be this type of personality. Or if you are so wonderful to your parents that they never let you think you're anything but a little God, then you haven't learned from your parents that you're not a little God. You haven't learned it in incremental doses. So if you've been extremely pampered by a doting parent, you have had that grandiosity not gradually transformed into self-esteem. It has remained raw. You're still a little god on the high chair, or goddess on the high chair. So this is the one that they know most about in terms of the literature. You see this form of the narcissistic personality disorder most clearly. But it can also be expressed if the warrior archetypal pattern is loaded with archetypal energy. And in that case, it doesn't come out as a little Lord Fauntleroy on his high chair. How would you suggest that an inflated warrior, the grandiosity coming out in the form of the warrior, would express itself? Like Rambo in violence. The violent personality who goes into rages a lot and who acts out violently a lot. You see the boy warrior or the girl warrior sometimes. I've worked with a number of people who've been battered by their wives.
Couldn't that also be people who get fanatical about causes?
Yep. She says, couldn't that also be people who get fanatical about causes?